you released of Golden Verse recently. It's a lot different to Birth of the Marvelous. And once I had an artist tell me albums are a lot like old photo albums where they're a snapshot of where you are in your life. So he told me when I write something, I go back and listen to the music and I can remember, oh yeah, this was going on and I was writing this and that was going on. Do you feel that when you compare the two albums that it was just different places in your life and as a result different things were coming out of you?
Yes, it is exactly that, I would say. At the time of the first album, I was kind of sad, uh,
Mhm.
and then in the time of this writing of this album, I had a little bit of simmering rage in me. Um,
Right.
I would say I'm neither of these two people in real life, really, but the music does have a tendency to come out in the way that your body is feeling. I would say I don't tend
Sure.
to use my brain that much. I tend to feel it more than I when I think it. Um, so a lot of it is, yeah, it's very. I would say it's quite intuitive, for better or worse, really.
Right. Okay. So was there any purpose to go that way, to make things heavier? Did you want to do that for a second album and just take people in a different direction? Or you're saying you don't really think about it, it just kind of comes out based on the feeling?
Yeah, I'm quite obsessed with the idea of making extreme ideas listenable.
Okay.
Like I almost want, like my girlfriend, for example, to be able to listen to a blast beat, but actually be able to like sing along with whatever it is that's happening over it.
Right.
So I like this that kind of tension between accessibility but also extremity, and
Mhm.
um, I think as a natural result, we hit more like higher levels of intensity than we did in the first album. It was quite a subdued, melancholic thing last time, and it's not that
Right.
it doesn't have its heavier moments,
Mhm.
um, but it didn't quite. It's not the levels of aggression that we've got on the new album. I think it's still got all the same ingredients. It's got like some sermon hallmarks, um, but broadly speaking, it's a much more blunt force
Yeah.
album, I would say.
Yeah, me personally, from my ignorant standpoint, I
Mhm.
would say that the first album is a lot more textured than this album is, a lot more layered.
Yep.
Or this one is really, as you're saying, just pretty straight ahead with the aggressive aspect of the music and the feeling in it.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right, and yeah, you're definitely not ignorant. You have heard correctly, I'd say.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
um, there is a 4-year gap between both of the albums. At what point in time do you start putting music together for this album? Because I read in the bio that you're writing stuff all the time, but at what point do you start to feel confident? Okay, I think this will go great with the next chapter of Sermon.
I mean, I had started writing this way before the release of the last album,
Okay,
but I would say that the pandemic slowed this down by about 2 years.
gotcha.
So we would have had this album long ago if it wasn't for that. I think we would be in a very different place as well. We would have been able to do the performances that we were supposed to, and I'd actually say now we're limping a bit because of that. Um, but it start. I mean, I am writing music all the time. Although the truth be told, I haven't done it for quite a while because I was waiting for so long for this album to come out, and now that it has come out, I feel a little bit lost, to be honest. I don't
Okay,
think I've got any. I've got a title for the album, but I
mhm,
don't have like a set idea like I did this album. Uh,
gotcha.
so I'm kind of just waiting for it to hit me, much to the label's dismay, I think. Um, but you know, if it's shit, I'm not. It's not being released. So
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and that I think so many bands were affected different ways with the pandemic. I mean, like each one of us, our lives are different. So the way that you approach it is different to what you want with your music. I mean, some bands just I mean, I interviewed people that said, "Look, if I hold on to this, I'm gonna hate the music." Others said, "No, I need to hold on to this because I need to make a proper presentation of this music."
Yeah.
So, I get exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I think I mean, for me, it was creatively stifling, but I've read from other people, like Tobias Ford. She said, he could really get his head down because he didn't have to tour. Same with Mastodon; they said a similar thing. James Stewart, the drummer,
Mhm,
and Decapitated and a load of other bands. He found it quite. I think it was a well-earned break in a way, not to ignore the tragedy that surrounded it, but
mhm,
this guy hadn't taken much time off for about 10 years, so
right,
I think he almost needed the enforced break. But for me, I did not. I didn't know if there was ever going to be a world worth releasing music in again, so I just
mhm,
didn't see any point. So I just put my tools down and just crawled up in bed, basically.
gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and I was gonna ask you about James. Um, when you're writing music, how
Mhm.
much do you have him in mind for the songs?
I suppose on this album, it plays to his more obvious way of playing a bit more than the
Mhm.
last one. The truth is, though, he's such a versatile drummer. Like I've seen him play in like hip hop bands, and like he can really, really do it all,
Right.
honestly. And so I mean, the only thing I will ever do when it comes to writing drums for him is I'll basically soundboard whether this is actually possible to play. So
Okay.
if I do a blast beat, I'm like, is that too fast? And he'll be like, I need it at this BPM. And is this pattern going to work? And he's like, well, maybe I'd play a bit more like this or something, or
Right.
it would be more manageable. But more or less, I can take him most things and he's going to be able to play. But I don't tend to design it around his skills simply because he can do anything really.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything that he throws back at you that makes you think, maybe I should change what I wrote initially because I think it would fit better with what he's doing?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, I'd say when we get into the studio, I mean, we don't play together. What
Right.
we do is I send him some demos, and then we'll get to the studio, and hopefully he's learned it. And if we hit a part where he's like, "I think it should be this," and then we listen to it, and I'm like, if as long as, to be honest with you, as long as it keeps the pace of the
Mhm.
song, I'm not too bothered what he plays. It's the pace the of it that really matters because that's the way the song builds. That's the bit that gives the song a reason to listen.
Mhm.
Um, so I tend, yeah, no, I don't tend to guide it. Like I like the ideas, honestly.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Eh, More so than anything because not only being a wannabe musician myself, but interviewing people over these years, you hear about, people saying, "Well, you have to play this because this was my idea, that was my idea." And I've always thought, well, if you've brought somebody on because of their pedigree or their style of playing, I get that you want a certain thing, but you also have to kind of trust that person to do their thing as well. And that's what it seems to me from what you're saying you're doing with James.
Yeah, I think what's really important is to just hear it back. So if
Mhm.
someone presents you with an idea, you need to hear it to
Yeah.
know whether it's going to be good or not. You can't just be like, yeah, that's the song now. You got to. It's a sculpting process. You've got to chisel away at it a bit. Um, but yeah, I'm not too ego driven in the sense that I won't listen to anyone. I think that's a strange way to be. I'm actually, to be honest with you, I'm more like I'm like you. I'm pretty much a fraud. Like I don't really know music. I don't understand music. I couldn't tell you what a time signature is at all. Um, I just use my instinct and I just keep persisting, and I think that's my main strength is I will keep persisting at it, and
Mhm.
I've got a fairly good vision or a fairly clear vision. Maybe good
Mhm.
debatable, but it's fairly clear. So I know how to steer the ship, and I think I know how to steer other people's input in a way.
Mhm.
I think there's some other good people like that in the world that are really good. I think Tobias Forge is good. I think Nurgle from Behemoth is
Mhm.
excellent at doing that. They're almost like creative directors. They're not
Right.
solely they're not like virtuoso musicians. They're not Yngwie Malmsteen, are they? You know,
Right, right, right.
they've got a strong vision and they know how to get it to go. And I think maybe I'm more like that, just without any of the success that they've had.
Well, hopefully that's on its way.
Maybe.
Yeah, and that I think is important because those are really two schools of thought. You know, I've when I used to do album reviews, I would bring that up all the time. Not everything has to be in vain. Not everything has to be a million notes. Sometimes just something by feeling it or just something that, makes you move a certain way. That's as good or better than something that's got a million notes that are not saying anything to you.
I think that's I think it's true. I think music like good music is all about contrast and texture, and it's not that fast playing doesn't have a place.
Right.
I think it's just it needs dynamics for me to
Yeah.
certainly for me to stay interested in it. And yeah, I'm a less is more kind of guy. But then sometimes more is more, and
Right.
there's no solos in sermon because I think it's cheating. I think
Okay.
you I think when you put a solo in there, it's because you can't make the part interesting enough, which is a stupid opinion of mine, really, because sometimes it's nice to have a solo, but I think if we ever did do a solo, for example, I'd make it much more, almost the whole song would be a solo, like
Mhm.
say like Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms,
Right.
something like that. But yeah, I try not to do stuff like that. But I can do it. I can physically play it. I just, I don't think it makes the song. That's all.
Right. The first time that I got to listen to, of Golden Verse, um, the first thing that I thought of because I didn't, when you get the promos, they don't give you a whole lot of information with who wrote what or where the bands are from or whatever most of the time. So I usually just turn the album on and I just start listening to it while, I'm doing whatever other work as I'm going. And the first thing that came to mind was this isn't an American band.
Oh,
Uh,
'cause you can hear my accent. Is that?
no, not because of your accent, but because of your cadence in your voice
Mm,
and your delivery. And little by little, I'm like, this is a singer out of somewhere in the UK. And sure enough, I started reading the bio and everything else. I'm like, yep, got it.
you got it.
Um, how much? Because I mean, I have listeners who are in Ireland, who are in Manchester, who are in. I'm trying to think where another one of my listeners is from, who's one of the more diehards. But um, they always talk about Marillion, and they talk about different harder progressive bands. You mentioned Dire Straits, which is a band that was huge all over Europe.
Mm,
Whereas as a kid living in the States, um, talking about Dire Straits until Money for Nothing came out, the vast majority of people didn't even know who they were, you know?
yes.
So how much do you think having that background in music from the UK helped drive what you do with Sermon?
I think it's just a natural consequence of. I didn't want to put on an American accent
Right.
because actually it's easier to sing. But the thing I always found was, certainly in a lot of metal bands, the clean singing part tends to be a little bit Americanized, and I
Okay.
didn't want that, so I
Mhm.
I don't tend to put the accent on. It's funny that you mentioned Marillion because I actually grew up with Steve Hogarth's daughter, and I have woken up in that man's house plenty of times when we used to have like little house parties when we were kids. And he's a lovely man. He genuinely one of the funniest people I've ever met. And but yeah, I like hearing about people talking about Meridian because it's like I feel really connected to them. He used to take us to Porcupine Tree gigs and stuff when we were kids, and
Right.
anyway, that's by the by. I don't think the British thing I'm not sure whether it harms or helps us. It kind of just is what it is, and I think it would make it sound less regal if it was Americanized a bit. Not to um, shit on the American accent,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just
No.
I think it's just there's a sort of symbolism around that. It's like how like Rammstein sound very authoritative.
Mhm.
It's quite an ugly language, German, but it is authoritative, I would say, and it does make you chant it, even though you haven't a clue what is being said.
Right. No,
Mm.
I think it helps you stand out as well because instantly I see progressive metal and you're used to hearing every band sound like a certain way, especially over the last 10 years. Um, so I think what you guys are doing really helps stand out by not being just another band, as you're saying, just doing the same old within the progressive metal style of things, especially today in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, I'd never really thought of it myself, but I suppose now you mention it, maybe it is kind of it does put like it's like the fingerprint of
Yeah.
the band almost. Even if I'm not the best singer in the world, but I guess it still helps the identity of it. It still, you know, maybe helps it stand out for better or worse.
Yeah. I would say for better, personally. But,
Oh, thank you.
how long did it take you to create the persona of him? How long did it take for you to get it right to a place where you thought, "Okay, this is where I wanna go"? And do you feel that you have finished evolving him, or does him need to evolve as new chapters of sermon come about?
So I don't. I think the visual persona of it is has taken a long time and many failed different experiments. Um, in terms of the personality that you're receiving right now, that's pretty much who I am in real life, I would say. So I haven't really worked very hard to make a whole other type of personality. Um, and maybe I should have done. Maybe it should have been more like Sleep Token, where you send out like cryptic messages, like you're part of some secret society.
Right.
Maybe I could have done that, but I just think it would just be too hard to keep up, and it would be difficult to have conversations like this, like I'm having with you now.
Mhm.
Um, and they're important to have because we need to sort of be in the media space somewhat. So I haven't put a lot of effort into it that way. But actually, the mask that you see is very different to the thing that was intended. It was more like a golden skin that I had on my head.
Okay.
And the problem is, I got a prosthetics maker who did all like Doctor Who stuff
Mhm.
uh, to build me a new face, essentially. The problem was it was just so hard to sing in it, and it was so heavy and suffocating. I just thought, well, this isn't going to work unless I spend thousands of pounds to get it to work.
Right.
So what we've got here is a different vision than what I had, and it's taken a long time to kind of get it anywhere, to be honest. But yeah, I think it's going to change per record, and I think it's probably going to play a part in live shows. And my instinct tells me that it's probably going to be like almost like a rack of masks on the stage. And as you play different eras, you replace the face. You
Wow.
know? I think it would make it quite nice. But we'll see if that actually ever happens. If we can even play, full stop, really.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea. You think about all of the bands that have done theatric theatrical things with masks or with makeup or different
Mm.
things like that. It's really one kind of thing per tour. So having that ability to kind of change while you're on stage to bring a different persona out per album that you're playing songs from, that's a real cool idea.
Yeah, I think it would. I live. I've always wanted people to forget that it's a band playing.
Mhm.
That you're sort of immersed in the visual of it. And I think in the beginning, it's probably just going to be down to light and like fog and this changing of a face, maybe. And I just want, you know, have you ever seen Sun?
I haven't seen them, but I know who they are.
I mean, it's not an easy watch, but
Mhm.
it's unlike anything you're likely to experience. It's almost like an art installation, but you completely lose yourself in it. It's really it's just three figures and this wall of sound, and you just sort of forget what's happening. It's really interesting. So I'm quite keen for something like that to happen with us, but whether it will or not, I don't know.
Okay. And you just mentioned about playing shows. You guys have played one show,
Yeah.
but obviously you also just mentioned the pandemic has gotten in the way with everything that you guys had in mind. Um, from the live show standpoint, what do you have envisioned, or do you have anything set up at the moment to do more shows this year?
It's a real struggle actually because I know basically it comes down to money because this doesn't function like a normal band. And so, for example, I inquired about a rehearsal room for 5 days so we could put on a show in London or whatever. You know, to leave the drum kit there overnight for a week or whatever, and it was like £1,000. And I was just like, well, that's not worth the risk just yet. So we're trying to look for a way around it, but we haven't had any offers or anything, which is a shame. But I think also at the same time, it's the wrong time of year to get offers because I think we're going to rely on festivals basically,
Right.
and they were booked ages ago. So maybe if we can get something going, maybe if we could record a live performance in like a nice venue,
Mhm.
like a church or something, we could probably prove to people that we are able to do this thing on stage. So that's about as solid as my plan is at the moment, but it's a real struggle, real struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. Economics nowadays, and it's been a lot more in the conversation since the pandemic with bands that I interview. Uh, bands telling me, "Hey, we don't go here because, the petrol cost is way too much. We can't afford it." Other people saying, "Hey, I take up this is my vacation time away from my work where if I don't work a regular job, I can't do the band. So I need to break even at least. At least, the rush of the crowd and this and that will be my payment, but I can't lose thousands of pounds playing shows as a result." So it's a common thread whether people want to accept it or not in 2023 for a band that wants to go out and do shows.
I think, yeah, and also unless you're supporting like Slipknot or something. I mean, I'm not sure quite how it works, but unless people paid us to be on the support slot, it's never going to happen. Like we got offered a support slot by a fairly well known band, I would say, but they're not Slipknot big, and you know, it was £15,000 to buy onto the tour bus, basically,
Right.
which actually is quite good value to for all travel and accommodation for a month is pretty good for 6 7 people, to be honest.
Mhm.
But you know, I could buy a house with, you know, I could get myself a mortgage with that kind of money, and I just don't have it. So
Right.
it's just not possible to do really.
Yeah. Okay. Um, with regards to people picking up the Golden Ver or of Golden Verse, excuse me,
Mm.
you guys are obviously on Century Media.
No,
Uh,
we're in prosthetic records.
oh, okay. I screwed that up then. I apologize. That
Well, that's all right.
the PR person that I deal with also deals with Century Media.
Yeah, she does. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that's
It
my
does
screw
make sense. Your train of thought was correct.
up. What I was getting at, where
Mm.
should people go to pick up of Golden Verse and ensure that the most amount of money gets in your pocket?
I mean, the truth is, you know, the royalties we would receive is pretty much next to none, honestly. That's not to say prosthetic are screwing us over. That's just
Yeah.
how it is. But I mean, it's been difficult actually. I think they've got some distribution problems, and it makes it quite hard if you're not in America to actually get hold of this album. But I do know that Amazon is a pretty good place. I think most of the good money is done on Bandcamp, but the thing is, because it's through a label anyway, I'm not quite sure. I think it's probably good for the label if you get it through Bandcamp, but it doesn't really affect me, honestly.
Yeah.
Um, so I personally, I don't. I'm not even sure you can get the CD in the EU. I've not seen it, but you can certainly get the vinyl. I don't think they've sold out. I might be wrong. I've seen a couple of comments being like, "I can't get hold of this," and I honestly, your best bet is type it into Google and hope for the best. Because every time I try and link someone to it, it's out of stock. So it's a difficult one. I
Yeah.
don't I have no idea.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought of that before because even though a lot of people point towards Bandcamp,
Hmm.
when you're on a label like Prosthetic, you know, or Century Media or any of the other, metal labels that we know of, um, does that, does it really change how much the band gets as opposed to obviously if it's an even smaller label with a much more independent band, that's probably a lot different. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, as much as I need to survive, I don't really rely on this to survive, so I don't care. But I mean, I know that prosthetics certainly need to survive, and if anything, I would encourage people just to make sure that happens. Even though it's not the best deal in the world, but at the same time, it's not. It's no one can really sustain this industry because it acts like a pyramid scheme more than it is an actual industry. Uh,
right.
so I would say, Bandcamp buying in Bandcamp is I would do that.
Okay. And where should people go to keep up with Sermon?
That's a good question. I'd say like Facebook. I think it's Sermon Sound. We're also on Instagram. I actually prefer using Instagram. I don't particularly like Facebook, but I don't really post a lot on the feed on Instagram. I tend to post in the stories a bit more because people tag us and stuff. But you can use any of those. Twitter, I've got Twitter, but everyone just shouts at each other on there. It's really depressing on Twitter. It's just so much outrage over everything. It's really difficult to look at, I find.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're on there too, and I'm not really joining in the fight with anyone, but maybe I should. But I think it would just stress me out, so I don't.
Yeah, yeah. Social media, necessary evil, unfortunately.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, this is him from Sermon, and you're listening and watching Signals from Mars.
Thank you for watching the Signals from Mars live stream. You can watch the show live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch, or check out replays on YouTube. Go to signalsfrommars.com for more information. This concludes our show.